Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life. My name is Andy, and we have a very special episode lined up today. And when I say the first day of the rest of your life, you never know, because this one's going to be a really interesting one, and it really could spark some serious change in life, which it has for me, and I'll get into that shortly. But with me behind the helm today, as usual, is my brother Mike.
Hello, everybody. There you are. I'm looking for the right camera. Nice to be here. Nice to be back. I'm personally really excited because it's quite an honor when we have an out-of-town guest able to pop into the studio with their short visit here. So this is very exciting for me, too.
Yeah, but as usual, we're recording out of 70 West Cordova Street here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, out of our business Floathouse. And if you have no idea what floating is, you can go to our website, Floathouse.ca, and there's all sorts of good information about flotation therapy. Really, it's a great way to get still. Get still, get quiet. We create an environment with minimal sensory input, and it's a great way to connect with whatever's going on inside of you. And I basically like to float once a week, and I find if I don't, I feel the stress start accumulating into my body. And also, I'll go in there to sort myself out, just to examine the thoughts that I have going on in my mind, things that are coming in, emotions, feelings, and it's just an overall great tool. So
yeah, and if you're tuning into us and you don't live in Vancouver, there's float centers everywhere,
yes.
And it's quite the I'd say heart-forward industry for the most part. People that get involved with floating, start up these centers, are usually because they're a die-hard floater.
It's very mom and pop.
It is, very much so. So, if you're curious about floating at all, definitely go and just do a Google search. I think floatationlocations.com is a great little resource, hub to find a float center near you. So definitely check it out if this is piquing your interest.
Excellent. So for today's guest, we have a repeat guest. He was just on fairly recently. We have released a podcast early in January, but Paul Selig is here with us in studio. He's in town for a workshop called Beyond the Known. It's a 2-day workshop. And for those of you who haven't heard of him yet, he is a channeler or a clairaudient. And he is the author, but he is the channeler of 6 and coming 7 channeled texts of the I Am the Word, and the Book of Love and Creation, the Book of Knowing and Worth, the Book of Mastery, the Book of Truth, and the Book of Freedom, which is the latest one. And we have a new one coming called the Book of
Beyond Known.
Beyond the Known. Mm-hmm. Beyond the Known. So, welcome. Great to have you in studio.
Thanks for having me.
It's amazing.
So, yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited. And after our first conversation we had on Skype, and I'm so glad because it's so much better than Skype, but you did a personal reading for me, and I didn't put it on the internet because I felt like it was very personal, and I didn't necessarily want everyone in the world to hear it. But I took some of that advice to heart, and because of the advice you've given me, I've cut out alcohol and cannabis. Not that I was a heavy alcohol user anyways. I might have like 2-3 drinks a week, but I just completely cut it out of my life for the past almost 7 weeks now, and I feel really good. And the advice you've given me has really helped, and this seems to be something that you do regularly. This is part of your deal, and it's not necessarily advice coming from you, although sometimes it is, because you've learned a lot from the guides through channeling for years now, and what sort of impact do you think that you're making with people in their lives? What do you hear on a regular basis? For me, it's been it was transformative talking to you. And what do you normally get from people?
Well, I hear two different things or two kinds of things because I do 2 different kinds of work. The channeling comes through me, and when I'm channeling, I'm just taking dictation. I'm really reseated, and I'm hearing and I'm repeating what I hear as fast as I hear it. And that's the information that all winds up in the books. The books are unedited transcripts of those channelings. And so people, can feel the energy that comes through, and they say, their lives have been changed, and they're waking up and they're becoming clairsentient. They can feel energy, or they can, their own abilities are kicking in. But mostly the guides are teaching spiritual or energetic development. And so the responses from those sessions are all around this. What I did with you at the end of the last podcast was a reading.
Right.
And that's psychic work, and that's a little bit different. They call me a medium for the living, so I have this odd ability to step into other people and hear them, or hear the people that they ask about who I don't know and haven't met. So, I don't tell people what to do, and I don't tell people they should drink or not drink. It's not, that's not it. But if I'm tuned into somebody and I'm accessing information for them specifically, they can validate it through their own experience or about the people in their lives. And the response to that's, always positive. And, the guides I work with, I mean, I'm not a fortune teller, and I'm not there to tell people how to get what they want in the way that they want it. The guides are often rather direct when they come through in a reading. But much of what I'm doing when I'm hearing in a reading is hearing an aspect of you that I have access to. And it can be hearing you at a level of personality where you come through perhaps saying, my life isn't working and this is why. Or the higher aspect of you that might explain what you need to move through the issue that perhaps is presenting as a bit of a block. So, fortunately, the response is positive to what I do.
Excellent. And so, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask, for these two kind of, for lack of a better word, skill sets, this channeling of the guides and then the ability to do a psychic reading, did one of those come before the other? Did they kind of come simultaneously? Did you start to pick up on one more than the other initially?
Initially, I had studied a form of energy healing when I was maybe 30 years old. I'd sort of woken up spiritually a few years before that, and I was volunteering at a center in New York that was providing services for people with life-challenging illness, and I found that when I had my hands on people, I began to hear stuff for them. So if I had my hand on your chest and I heard the name Arthur, I learned to say, who's Arthur? And you might say, my father, my son, whatever. And that would prompt an energy release. So that was psychic. Or perhaps, for all I know, it was the guides whispering the information that I needed. But I make a distinction. The two, I can work between the two interchangeably. So when I'm channeling, I say it's like I'm in the back seat of the car. I'm reseated. I'm sort of reading a magazine, and trying to mind my own business and let the transmission come through. And when I'm reading, I'm in the I'm in the passenger seat. The guides are there. I'm in the passenger seat, and we can go back and forth. So they'll pipe in and say, they'll say, ask him what happened when he was 9 years old, or the issues really around the relationship with the mother, and go to age 16. I go, what happened when you were 16? You say, well, my mother threw me out of the house. You see, and then we go and we work with that stuff. So that's how it operates.
Very interesting.
And for people who haven't heard Paul before, you have a very interesting way that you channel, and it comes in the form of a whisper. And basically, you got a transmission, you whisper, and then you repeat out loud what the guy said, because the whisper is quite quick. It's an interesting way of channeling. I guess it's different for everybody. It happens to be the way you do it.
Yeah, I was saying to somebody the other day, I don't look like I'm supposed to look. I don't channel like I'm supposed to look. I mean, none of this makes any sense at all. It's just how it comes through.
Right. Yeah.
And I just show up for it as best I can. When I first started channeling, and I wasn't expecting to channel, nor was I trying to channel. I was doing this little group in my apartment where I was doing energy work, and I began to hear. Initially, it literally felt like somebody had their lips pressed against my forehead and was imprinting the word. And then I would whisper that as it would come, and that was the transmission. And that's how it began. So the initial whisper is the transmission itself, and often it is coming a mile a minute. And then I have to repeat it so people can follow. All of these things are recorded, so when the books are done, the transcriptionist is listening to the recordings to make sure that everything matches up and it's clean. That's how it happens.
I was going to say, that's one of the most interesting things about it is the transmissions come through, and I think you probably have developed this skill to be able to listen and then announce them more accurately, but they come through just so, like, I can imagine this very minimal editing being done grammatically, even with the books.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in like the last book, which is the one that's coming out soon, there may have been 4 or 5 words changed.
Right.
And that's often things like, that come when I'm speaking so fast that I drop a syllable in the word. Or, the editor might change lay to lie because, I'm speaking and I'm, relying on what I'm hearing, but I'm speaking so fast I don't care.
Right.
So there's really no editing. The only edit the actual edit that was made in the book that's coming out next and that book was done, and the last 2 or 3 maybe were done entirely in front of audiences, in front of students.
Interesting.
So at one point, and it was in a workshop in Seattle actually, when they were delivering a lecture, and there was one in the front row who kept making noise. which was driving me crazy. And the guide said to her, for Paul's sake, please be quiet in the front row, and this is not in the book. And that's the only edit. Right. Because, and you would
Makes
never
sense.
know it was there. I thought about leaving it in as a footnote, and I thought, well, they said it's not in the book, so we'll leave it. But no, I don't get to go back and make it pretty.
Right.
I really don't. Most of the work that happens in the transcripts is correct punctuation.
Yeah, right.
Because they're really delivering a whole. I mean, it's usually the book comes usually in 5 to 7 page installments at a time. That's how long a 40-minute lecture generally is what's transcribed, and that's the block of time they'll work in. And sometimes they'll do 3 of those over the course of a day in a weekend workshop.
Right.
Is it energetically tiring for you when you're doing this?
Yeah, it is. I mean, my body's being used. My central nervous system seems to be part of how this whole thing operates. I'm told, and I don't see it, but I'm told my eyes even change color when I work. They run bright blue when I'm doing. There's certain attunements that the guides do when they sort of stand in front of people individually and work with their energetic field. So there's a whole physical component to this that I don't understand. But it also can be enlivening. I did an evening in Seattle this week, and there were a lot of people there. The energy was very high, and I left actually in a more lifted state and more energized than I was when I came in. But that was a 2-hour evening, and I think a little odd in that I channel in long stretches. The weekend workshops I'm channeling, I've been known to channel 5 hours in a day. And that's in front of people. So. That just takes its toll anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's another aspect to your channeling, which we both observed in my own personal reading, where your face would actually almost embody the emotion or energy of the person you were tapping into.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that was very interesting because when you did it for me, for the person that you were channeling in my life, I was like, at first, when you did it, I was still taken back.
Yeah.
I felt the presence of that person in my life, and it was a bit intimidating. I had an initial shock of not from you, but from the expression and how close it was.
Yeah, I step into the body. So if you were to give me the name, say, of, I don't know, any name really, in your relationship to the person, I can step into the person. I'll often take on their demeanor or their expression. I mean, I've been filmed doing this. I was on a TV show a couple of years ago called The Unexplained, where I was reading for a mother, and all the producers said was, "You're reading for a mother." And I asked her how I could help her, and she said, "Well, I'm having problems with my kid." And I stepped into the kid, and I somatized the kid. And the kid had cerebral palsy, which I didn't know, but you can see me on camera sort of, becoming him, and they intercut me with him. It was really interesting, but it happens all the time. And it's how I learned I could do this. I was actually doing a reading for somebody who asked about her father, and my eyes were closed, and I had tuned into her father, and she gasped, and I said, "What's up?" And she said, "Well, you started to look just like him."
Yes.
And it wasn't a good relationship, so she was disturbed. And I found out I could pretty much do it every time.
Yeah.
So it's just how I work.
Yeah, I mean, I was able to see that too, because the person
you pointed it out, actually.
Yeah, it was our father, and so I mean, you looked like him, which was it was quite something to see. I'm curious, when you're doing channeling with the guides, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what is the sensation like for you? Are you in a very kind of calm, meditative sort of state, very calm, or is it kind of high, or what does it feel like from your personal perspective?
Well, it's really simple. I like to say, and the guides often say, we're all radios and we're always in broadcast. And I actually am not sitting in a chair meditating for 20 minutes before I channel. I'm often, worrying about something or, having my own inner life. And, I ask every time before I channel that Spirit puts the words in my mouth. But what I'm doing effectively is turning a dial on a radio to hear another broadcast. So if my personal broadcast for the day is angst or worry or, hopefulness, whatever it might be, and I tune into the guides, suddenly I'm tuned into another broadcast that's actually replacing my own.
Okay.
So my energy stuff and my emotional life is receded. Now, if I'm having a rough time personally and I have to channel, the guides often override it or they'll address it. pretty effectively in the channeling in order to be able to move through it. I mean, it surprises me at times how trustworthy it is. You know, I remember having to do a channeling the day I put my dog down, you know, and she'd been my dog for 12 years, and she was a dear, loving friend, and then having to show up for this thing. And the guides came through crystal clear with their lecture in an awareness, I suspect, of what I was going through in terms of challenge. But my emotional state doesn't seem to be at all impactful of how they work through me. So it's really that simple. Imagine you're driving in your car and you're hearing rock and roll and you're jumping up and down, and all of a sudden you just turn the dial an iota, there's another music. And that's what I'm bringing through, and that's what I'm aligning to.
Has there ever been a situation where like you were in a state that it's simply like you weren't able to turn the dial?
There are times when it's more challenging for me to do this, and this is my problem, not the guide's issue.
Right.
I mean, I always say every time I do this, because I don't prepare, I don't know, you know, I'm here doing a weekend workshop, I don't know what they're going to talk about. They'll probably introduce their work because they usually do, and after they introduce it, all bets are off. They're going to do what they're going to talk, you know, that's how it happens. So every time I do it, it's like jumping into a pool or jumping off a diving board, you know, in the hopes that there's water in the pool or in the expectation.
Right.
And fortunately, there always has been. Otherwise, I don't think I could show up.
Right.
I mean, I've heard stories of people that I know who do comparable work or similar work who've shown up and sat in front of the audience and nothing happens.
Wow.
And, you know, you can't make yourself channel. It's not possible any more than you can make yourself feel the water under a shower head. Either the water is on and you're getting wet, or it ain't on. You know, so that's my experience. But there are times when I'm more challenged by, you know, what's coming through,
right,
and I may back off from it.
Now the guides, again, they tell it pretty straight. They don't seem to sugarcoat things. They're not afraid to be very truthful and honest in what you need to hear. And again, sometimes it's not always what we want to hear, but it's what we need to hear. You know, what is the motivation of the guides? Like, why are they here? Why are they helping us? And I did ask this on the first conversation we had, but it's like, you know, they're here guiding us. And do they have an agenda? Are they trying to help humanity, maybe?
Well, they're sure not trying to hurt it,
right.
You know. Yes, they're trying to help it, and they say that they're teachers and they're here to teach, and this is what they do. And they're teaching us to realize, they say, the truth of who we are, which supports us in realizing who others are as well. I mean, they say again and again and again, you can't be the light and hold another in darkness. And to a large extent, what they say we've done is we've misidentified with the personality structure as who and what we are. You know, and the truth of who and what we are and who anyone is, they would say, is the divine in form. And the realization of that, which is the level of consciousness that attends to that, is what they're supporting us in moving into vibrational accordance with. So they've said since the beginning, since the first book was channeled, which was almost 10 years ago, this week actually.
Whoa.
And that was unexpected. I didn't know I was channeling a book till 2 days before they started, and then they just dictated the whole thing in 2 weeks. And that was the first of many. They say in that book that humanity is at a time of reckoning. And they say a reckoning is a facing of oneself and all of one's creations, and everything that's been created in fear or in deceit, because deceit is fear, it's another mask of fear, needs to be recreated in a higher way. And they're supporting us in that realization, I guess, of who and what we truly are.
Have we gone through, as a species, different octaves already? Like, are we on this trajectory? Is it like a...
I actually hear yes, which is funny. Nobody's ever asked that question. Have we gone through other octaves before? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Always. Can't stop. I hear always, and you really can't stop. It goes on and on. It really goes on and on. Realization is a process. Realization is a process. It's not a destination. And that's from them.
Is that like an evolutionary experience, basically? Just on a deeper level than...
They're saying it's a realization of who and what you truly are and what that means and really varying strata and varying degrees. So say this. They're telling me to say this, so I'm going to see if I can try to explain it. So while you would be perfectly right to say you're a man, you're expressing in a male body. You look in the mirror, you see the body. Okay, it must be a guy. And while that's a way of knowing the self, that's not who you truly are. Do you understand that?
Yes.
It's a level of knowing. So my sense of what they were just saying is that there's always more and more levels. So they've said that they use the term Christ when they talk, and they speak to the Christ. They define it as the aspect of the Creator that can be realized in material form. It's sort of the seed of the divine that they say is present in all manifestation, that seeks its own realization or expression. And they say that's the level of alignment we can come to while in form. But because we're in form, because we've taken a body, the body itself also needs to be lifted in vibration. But that there are other levels or strata, octaves, for what they use beyond that,
right?
Which I suspect have nothing to do with requiring a body to operate.
Okay, right. So we're limited somewhat by the form that we're taking right now.
Yeah.
Can we? All right.
Well, I have questions because this actually really fits in well. I had these questions come to me about the octaves and different frequencies. So you talked about how our body can shift into different vibrational. Okay, first of all, an octave is a frequency. Is that also a vibrational? Is it patternistic?
I'm the channel, so I don't know how they would answer that. They may come in. I'll tell you what I understand about it from what they've taught thus far. So they say we're operating in a collective field. This is a collective field. In this field, I know that this is a table in front of us and that there's snow outside, and we can all sort of confirm the collective. And this would also go to a lot of ideas that we are in collective agreement to, time, for example, or mortality, or all of those things. These are expressions of a shared octave.
Okay.
And an octave, they say, has highs and lows, like the notes play high and low. But they also say that every note can be played in a higher octave into infinity.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yes.
So just because the ears don't hear it doesn't mean that the note isn't being played.
Okay.
And so the idea of aligning to the higher, actually in this case, and this is what the Book of Freedom is really beginning to take on, is about releasing the limitation of the collective that we've inherited. Much of this stuff is inherited structure.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of what it means to be a man is an idea.
Mm-hmm.
The idea, a table is actually an idea. Yeah. That's been made into form. Now they say there's one note being played in the entirety of reality, which is, you can call it God or source. It doesn't really matter to them, I don't think. But they say that one note is actually being played in different ways in all manifestation. So everything, finally, they would say, is an articulation of that note. So the divine as this glass of water, or the divine as the sky, or the divine as, your nostril. Do you understand this? It's one source expressing in different ways. And they say everything is expressing in tone or vibration. And what they're supporting us in doing is lifting that tone to what they're now calling, the upper room, or the higher octave, the octave that rests above. And our realization of that octave, and they say to realize is to know, we're actually able to lift what we encounter through co-resonance to that level. So they've said, for example, and I'll shut up.
No.
They say God is, they say you can't make a rock holy, but you can realize the inherent divinity of the rock, which is realizing the source of the rock. In that realization, you're actually lifting the rock in tone or in field. And when you're operating at that level yourself, it's basically an automatic encounter with a transformed reality.
Okay. Sorry, that hit me hard. But so when we do things such as, say, meditation or floating, or use other spiritual medicines, or spirit sound healing, or have those types of experiences, we have this shifting in our frequencies. That's kind of like the body's frequencies shifting into these higher levels. And then so when we have exposure to that, is it start to help us understand and realize what is the purpose of those types of experiences? How do they serve us?
I mean, my sense is, and they may disagree, and they're shaking my head no, so I don't think they're. I think they support us in showing that knowing that those things exist. You know, that there is more than we've been taught. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was about 25, I had an experience of energy. Or at least I don't know what happened to me, truthfully, but I had an experience of energy, and I started seeing little lights around people after that. And so I felt energy, and I was seeing these things, these sparks around people, and I was, my sense of reality was changing. Suddenly there was more than I had been told. Now, I think the challenge with having large experiences, and I've had a couple of them in my life, is that you get hungry for them. You want to rest there, and I want to repeat them and replicate them. And I don't know if that happens. When I had an experience when I was in my 30s and it was after a very difficult period of real knowing. I knew that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I knew everybody else was. And I had maybe 45 cents to my name, and I was in Manhattan. I mean, that's a tough place to be that poor. And it was a shocking period of grace for me, really. And there was something with me, and I knew it, And when I didn't feel that, I thought I'd done something terribly wrong, or I'd screwed up and, I missed the boat or whatever. But what I was given, I suspect, was a preview of a level of vibration that I could continue, operating in agreement with as I align to it. So this isn't goal-oriented work, People want to sort of, do whatever they can do to get there now and stay there now, and I suspect bypass some of the real requirements of development, which is, just because you've been to Paris doesn't mean you know how to speak French.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or that you can find your way around.
Yeah.
So the experience of knowing that Paris exists may bring you back there, for a longer stay.
How do these practices then, what's the balance between a practice and being too hungry to go back? You know what I mean? What's that balance?
I don't know. I'm a lazy guy, and I could benefit from a meditation practice I think that I don't have. And I think the guides are not big on prescription, the ones that I work with, because they say we can become tied to that, and then that becomes sort of, the practice then becomes the idol, not the way in to something. So how important, I suspect it really varies from individual to individual. There are people that I know that are extraordinarily disciplined, and what they really need to learn to do is how to not be in control and to allow. A lot of what the guide's teaching is allowance, which is being receptive. And you can't make yourself know. It's just not possible,
Right. Right.
And you really can't make yourself feel either. You can feel and you can know. And these things happen, I suspect, when we're open to receive them or able to, less so than we're striving to get them. So the idea of trying to conquer spirit, to me, makes no sense at all.
Can you, sorry, this is jumping off topic a little bit, but can maybe the guides elaborate on what is that aligned human being? Like, say, if you were moving towards that Christ consciousness and you're trying to align, what is the potential of that?
The potential of it, I'll ask them. You're gonna hear me whisper and repeat if I ask them, because it's interesting questions. Realized potential. The realized potential is manifest self. Is the manifest self operating in a higher octave for the benefit of all? That's not what you would think. It's not what you would think, or have it be, or have it be, or have it appear as, or have it appear as. In some ways, it's a transmuted self. In some ways, it's a transmuted self. The self that you have known, operating in a higher accord, operating in a higher accord for the benefit of the world. It's not getting more. It is not about getting more, becoming more, perceiving the self, or perceiving the self in any way as special. It's in some ways the renunciation. It's in some ways the renunciation of the idea of who you have been, Underline the word idea and underline the word idea. The idea of who you have been. The idea of who you have been is what must be transformed. Now you are as holy now as you will ever be, but you don't recognize it. Nor will you when you define yourself through the lower strata, period. and they're saying period.
Interesting. Now, so basically moving out of who we think we are. That's a very.
What they've been saying.
Yes. Now you do have these attunements that are repeated frequently. Are these tools that can help people move in that direction?
Yes, I hear. Well, they're saying yes, accurate. They're saying accurate. They support the realization. They're saying they support the realization of the divine self, of the divine self as may be known in form. So the guides call them, claims of truth. They say, what is true is always true. Again, like they just said, you really can make yourself holy. You already are, but we can forget our true nature. And I do every other minute, so I'm not exempt from this. So the attunement I suspect that you're speaking about is I know who I am, I know what I am, I know how I serve. And they say that's claimed by the true self who knows who he is or who she is. So the true self knows, the small self thinks. So when you claim I know who I am, it's actually being claimed through you. And that's identity. I know what I am means the divine in expression and form and manifestation. The what, I know how I serve is how one is most fully expressed as that, the true self in expression. It's not about taking another yoga class or, buying a bigger crystal or, having an idea of a spiritual life. It's essentially the embodiment of it. And that's a very different thing. Now, I think there are stages with all this. When I was 25 and brand new to this stuff, and I was raised an atheist and had very harsh judgment about, anything spiritual, I suspect, or I was dismissive of it. I first attached to the culture around it, and, wanting to feel like I was included. And then you move past that. I think that's a stage of development, You want to understand the vocabulary of the times you're operating in. But that's just a stage. So the realization that they're speaking to actually comes, I suspect, at the cost of those things.
Interesting. Do you have another specific question, Mike?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about humility. And again, I suspect that everyone is unique to a degree in terms of what they need, but how does humility perhaps become serving, and how does humility perhaps become hindering?
I'll see if I can take it on first, and I'm probably going to get it wrong. Yes, I hear yes, you get it wrong. I'm going to get it wrong. So I don't think that I'm special. And I don't perceive what I'm doing as special. It's just the way that I happen to be expressing, and it's no more special than anything or anybody else. And the challenge for many people is the need to be seen. And the guides I work with say, the true self doesn't care what anybody thinks of him or her. She's beyond that. The true self isn't operating in fear. The true self doesn't really have anything to prove. Now, that doesn't mean that you've become passive. It means you've become aligned in a higher way, and they say what you call to you is what you require, and what you require to demonstrate through or to learn through for the benefit of the self and for others. So humility, I don't think, you see, I show up from my work. My job is to show up anyway, and often when I don't want to. And I'm not a spiritual teacher, I'm not a guru, I don't pretend to be those things, I don't want to be those things. But I'm happy to show up in the way that I can. So in my case, I've got 7 books now with my name on the cover that I actually didn't write. And I don't feel some great sense of pride or ownership in the work. But I can say I showed up for this stuff, and I let go of the life I used to have in order to do these things, and I can be aware of the role that I play. So let me see what they want to say about humility, because they talk about it in the books, and it's a big subject. It's not that big. They're saying it's not that big. You can have it be big if you wish. Humility is a right awareness. Humility is a right awareness of who one is, in different ways, and it can come in different ways. I am a hard worker. I am a hard worker may be a true statement, may be a true statement in spoken humility, and spoken in humility. I am the hardest worker that was. I am the hardest worker that ever was, would be the small self and grandiosity, would be the small self and grandiosity. generosity. You must see how hard I work. You must see how hard I work. Would again be the small self. Would again be the small self seeking to be acknowledged, seeking to be acknowledged for an idea of who she is, for an idea of who she is. This one works as hard as I do. This one works as hard as I do. We have different gifts and abilities. We have different gifts and abilities, but we both enjoy what we do. But we both enjoy what we do. Would be a statement made in humility. Would be a statement made in humility about the awareness of somebody else's worth, about the awareness of somebody else's worth, or diligence in work, or diligence in work. The understanding is that you are not seeking to be known, is that you are not seeking to be known or announced as special, nor are you seeking to disregard another, nor are you seeking to disregard another for how they present. The true self knows she is a source. The true self knows she is of source. She is of source, of the divine self, and cannot exclude another from it. This does not deny her own holiness. She is not saying, look at those holy people. She is not saying, look at those holy people, but humble me is not holy. But humble me is not holy. That would be the small self. That would be the small self. Or person saying this, or personality self saying this. The divine as you recognizes divinity in everything he encounters, and that is true humility. And that is true humility, period, in the same period.
So, I had something come to me while that was going on.
Well, interesting note I had about humility was that, you do a lot of public appearances and podcasts and that, and humility doesn't necessarily refer to that you have to not be seen either, right? It's like, because sometimes you said I don't want to go to I don't want to speak, or I'm not feeling it today, but you do it because you feel like that's how you're being of service. And to me, that is a form of humility as well.
When I first got a website, which was probably 11 years ago or something, I didn't want one. I was a college teacher. I was doing a group in my apartment that met for 18 years. I mean, I'm not that I just sort of burst onto the scene. I've been doing this work in one form or another for quite some time. But when I first had to get a website so that I could, take payment for readings on the internet, my name wasn't on it and my picture wasn't on it because I didn't want anybody to find out that I was doing this. And that wasn't humility, that was fear.
Yeah.
You understand that? Mm-hmm. It wasn't. And the action of fear, the guides say, is to create more fear.
Totally.
Now, what I do is show up and accept the fact that there are going to be people that think that this is bullshit, that there are people going to think that this is amazing, that there are people that are going to want to put me up on a pedestal, and I really don't want any of that. It's just That's just not what this is about. I am worthy of the same level of respect for being that you or anybody else is. And it's that simple, I mean, the guides say again and again, no one is higher than the next. And frankly, no one is lower than the next either. Those are, again, just ideas. And the realization of the inherent divine in another is actually inclusive. It must be of all, regardless of what you think of them. So anyway, I'm on a tangent, and I'll leave it.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could, can you do readings on any, even public figures and things like that, or you can try at least? Is that possible? Mm-hmm. There's one public figure I'm really curious about, actually, and he's a Canadian. He's a psychologist at the University of Toronto named Jordan Peterson. Mm-hmm. And some people really love what he's done. They find him a great source of empowerment, and they've really benefited by his work. Mm-hmm. Other people feel threatened by his work, and they get upset with what he says sometimes. Mm-hmm. And he's been a bit of a controversial figure. However, he's also helped a lot of people. Uh-huh. I was wondering if you could step into him by chance and give us some insight into what he's really up to.
I don't know. I mean, it's an odd request only in that feels more like it's about entertainment value than helping somebody, which would concern me a little bit. Okay. And that's not really what I do. I mean, what I did when I taught myself how to do some of this stuff, stepping into people watching court TV back in the days when court TV was on, because I wanted to know who was lying. So I used to tune into the Simpson trial, or things like that, and step into people when they were testifying to see how they felt. And it was an interesting thing. Now, and I personally am very clear about this, that I don't give opinions on other people's work. And so if the guides are coming in to do that in some ways, I mean, I suppose they would if they wanted to. I actually get a head shake, no. Not necessary. I asked, should I tune in? Is this my resistance or fear? And they're actually saying it's not necessary.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I've tuned into, Trump at a dinner party,
Right.
for friends, but that's a very different kind of exchange.
Right. Yeah. I was asking more in the sense of trying to get some clarity, because there's a lot of questions and a lot of people are interested. In like, again, like some people really admire him and other people loathe him. So that's why I was just curious if there was any sort of commentary there.
I don't know him. I mean, if the guides, I would doubt the guides would as well. But I mean, if I were to tune into him, I'd be tuning into the human being,
Right.
and the consciousness that the human being holds. Perhaps not what he's espousing. If you wish you can. I mean, they're saying if you wish you can. So I'll step into the guy, but I'm not gonna read on his work, because that would feel inappropriate. What's the guy's name?
Jordan Peterson.
Let me see if I can. He comes through in charge. I think. Basically, coming through like this, I'm actually kind of smirking a little bit. There's a little bit of I'm in charge no matter what you think. So when I tune into this guy, there's a level of awareness, and frankly, a high awareness, at least from the right side, which is interesting, of how everything is being sort of taken and received. This is the symbol for congruence, so he's aware of how the work is going out into the world and how it's coming back. And with that, a little bit of a finger goes up in the air, a little bit of screw you. But in which case, and it comes through casually, which is good. And this doesn't necessarily mean screw you, it means boundary. Whenever I get the middle finger up, it's somebody saying boundary. This is a boundary. You don't get to cross it, so what? So in some ways, anything that's being thrown at this guy, he's quite happy to throw right back over that fence. Because he's basically aware of what he's doing, and he's quite aware of his audience, and seems to be somewhat accepting of the fact that however people are responding are what it's going to be. So
Interesting.
That's how I feel. Okay.
Okay, well that makes a lot of sense, because he doesn't seem shy at all to tell people what he thinks, and maybe that's potentially why some people get triggered, because I think he speaks from his level of honesty, whatever that is for him.
Why
so
not?
It's interesting, because I feel like he does feel like that he is making a genuine attempt to help people. However, and he's like kind of giving the finger in a sense where it's like, well, if they don't like it, that's their problem.
That's pretty much what this means. I mean, the boundary is, this is healthy. If somebody is doing that, it's screw you and it's aggressive. He's not doing anything aggressive.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know his work, so I have no personal comment on it whatsoever. He seems to be coming through in an awareness of what he's doing and being accountable for it.
Interesting.
Which, at that level of this is what you're getting and this is what whatever you think is your business, there's a little bit of that as well. So I'd like to leave it at that.
Fair enough. That's great. I wanted to jump back to a question I thought of that I couldn't remember before, but now I remember, is the balance between how do you know when it's this, like, let's say, for example, of the of just maybe a spiritual personal connection, but how do you know when it's the small self identifying with that, that notion of like spiritual bypass and kind of that versus like an authentic spiritual connection? Like how do you, is there anything we can do to know that we're not tricking ourselves in some way, shape, or form?
Well, I mean, this is how I sort of look at it. We can be over-attached to narrative or the ideas of who and what we are or what's happened to us or what somebody else has done to us. And so it's not about denying what happened. Do you understand that? Which would be spiritual bypassing. It's not about, feeling like crap and showing up smiling and saying, hi, everybody, it's a wonderful day, isn't it? That's inauthentic. I do think that some of what the guides are teaching is about aligning to the aspect of self that doesn't operate with the attachment to the narrative. So it's not like saying, it's not pretending that I wasn't the kid who was bullied in junior high school. I was, that's what happened to me. Am I the kid who was bullied in junior high school? If I want to attach to the narrative, it is. So I'm not pretending it didn't happen, but I'm also not claiming an identity through it. And that would be one of the ways that I would illustrate this. And I don't know if I did it accurately. We'll try. They're saying we'll try if we may. If we may, the agenda of the small self. The agenda of the small self is to replicate history, is to replicate history. He knows himself. He knows himself through what he has chosen, through what he has chosen, how he has claimed identity, how he has claimed an identity and seeks to perpetuate it, and seeks to perpetuate it. The true self as you. The true self as you knows who he is beyond occurrence, beyond occurrence. Is not abdicating responsibility, is not abnegating responsibility for his or her present, for his or her presence by attaching to the old, but is also deciding that what happened is what happened, that what happened is what happened, and not who or she is, and not who he or she is, period. Period, said yes. So what they're saying basically here is that everything's an opportunity to learn. Everything that happens. And if I can reframe my consciousness to that, or my way of operating, I begin to have a different experience. And this is school, and the guides say you incarnate with a bunch of lessons that you've taken on, that things to learn through, and you're going to call those situations to you in likelihood, and that's what life is, in order to learn through. But they also say again and again and again, you can't be a victim and a master at the same time. So the idea of being stuck in an old narrative is, I think, as challenging as the idea of bypassing or pretending. And I think, right awareness would be the key here.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was leading into. It's funny, a couple times you've said the words that were literally in my head about that stuff in terms of like victim, and I'm like, that would be a very healthy approach for a victim mentality to kind of take on, and like, but I mean, I think if you look far enough back, everyone has sort of a lineage of history that was probably in one way, at one time or another, very horrible, horrific, and whatever, whether it was from a European descent or an indigenous descent. So but maybe some of them, since they're closer to what the present day, they're more relevant, and people are more maybe stuck in the narrative of it and not able to maybe say, okay, yes, that has happened, but like, let's move forward. I'm not really sure what my question is, but I'm just kind of like filtering that through myself. I'm going to go back to some of my questions here just to see if I missed anything while I have the opportunity. Okay, the notion of presence, this is kind of something we hear a lot about in spiritual talks and books, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, this concept of presence. How does that, based off of how someone, say like Eckhart Tolle or Ram Dass has kind of articulated, how does that fit into serving us in terms of our inevitable, or not, well, maybe it is inevitable, our inevitable, growth towards higher vibration?
Well, you have to forgive me because I don't read these guys, and I don't read anybody, and that's because I'm trying to keep what's coming through me in transmission pure. So I don't know how they're defining presence in order to. So if you want to give me a definition of presence, I can take it on if I can.
Presence, I would say, is going into a state of being that, in essence, is the identification with form. Form could be a thought form of self. I guess the small self is split. So that identification with form is split, and you have more of an observing consciousness. And
I understand. I think I understand. So what's in the question about that is how do or what?
Yeah, what is that place in terms of, if it has a place in terms of serving us towards a higher octave?
I think it's a way of understanding. It's a step forward. It's a step forward for many who have associated themselves with the thoughts they think, with the thoughts they think. A meditation practice shows you're not your thoughts, shows you are not your thoughts. Perhaps you're not your body. Perhaps you are not your body. Now, we are not delineating one path for anybody, one path for anybody. Awareness comes in different stages. Awareness comes in different stages, different ways, to the level that one can hold them, that one can hold them. The one who understands the creation, the one who understands that creation is an operation of vibratory accord. A vibratory accord will claim the lessons she receives, to comprehend more. The novitiate may learn. The novitiate may learn that she is not her thinking, that she is not her thinking in order to comprehend the power of thought, in order to comprehend the power of thought. Everything is potential. Everything is potential. The idea of presence, or a secondary I, or a secondary I in observation, and observation is productive, and it supports the idea of a true self who may perceive differently, who may perceive differently than one who thinks she is, than the one who thinks she is. She is what she has been taught to be, period.
Fantastic, thank you. And another thing that popped into my mind when you were talking about the example of a rock, and by realizing the divine within a rock, brings out the divine of the rock. This is kind of like a concept of animism, which is a very, very old idea in terms of human religion, and if you want to say, the understanding. And this is very prevalent in, say, shamanic traditions as well.
Yes.
That notion of once we realize the divine within anything, literally helps to bring its divinity through.
Yeah.
And I'm just really curious about that relationship between us as a human form of divinity and that inanimate form of divinity. Like, how is that possible? How can we bring through its divinity by realizing its divinity?
Well, they say it's by knowing the what. So the claim, I know who I am in truth, I know what I am in truth. What, they say, is manifestation. And the what that you are is in vibration. So even if you work with this individually, you can usually feel the energy of, I know what I am in truth. Now, when you're moving to that level of vibrational accord, you can claim it in anything or anyone else. And you'll actually feel a residual effect of it. The claim is, I know what you are in truth. So if I've claimed that and I say I know who I am in truth and I've aligned to that, and this is again a process, and I can say to you, I know what you are in truth, I'm claiming what is always true. You see, you can't make anybody divine, but you can claim the inherent divinity. When the what is claimed for another, the what seems to align to that. It's not like I'm calling you a polo player, or I'm calling you, a swimsuit model. You can be those things, but that's not the truth of who you are.
Okay.
And the what that you are is the inherent divine. I didn't know the term. Is it animism? Is what it's called?
Yeah, animism, I think, it kind of acknowledges that, you could say like all things have its own form of consciousness, even things that are completely not living, Well,
they haven't expressed it that way, but they may get there, in their work. So here's how I've understood it. They say that your consciousness is informing everything you see. And what you damns you back. So what you put in darkness in consciousness calls you to that level of vibration. Yeah. And it's that simple. So I said when they were first teaching this, I said, so if there's a book on the table in Paris, does that mean that I have a relationship in consciousness to the book on the table in Paris? I said, yes, the moment you know of that book, your consciousness is actually informing the book. And how you hold anything in consciousness informs the vibration of the thing. So, there's that scientist who was doing those experiments with water.
Right, yes.
And that would be, I suspect, a way of looking at that. I find it interesting because when the guides teach, they bring through energy that's usually felt very palpably by people. So when they unpack this whole idea of what, I know what you are, I was really surprised at the potency of it. I was teaching at the Esalen Institute, and they actually told everybody to go out on a lawn and stand like 20 feet apart and claim it for a partner. And it was like energy catch. You could literally feel the waves of energy coming back to you once you claim the inherent divine in another.
That's interesting for sure. I know when I do the attunements, I definitely feel some sort of energetic shift, something move through me. It's a really interesting sensation. And I become more sensitive to that as well. I want to talk a little bit about people who are experiencing pain, and maybe it's mental, emotional, potentially physical, an illness. Because inevitably we're all going to get there at some point. What is the best advice from the guides on how to handle a situation like that when you find yourself in deep pain?
Oh, I don't know. I've been there, I channeled Book of Mastery with back pain that was so severe I thought I was going to, have to go for surgery. And and I never want to go through it again. And I have great compassion for people who live with that kind of thing. So what I do understand is everything's an opportunity to learn, finally, and that we choose different things to learn through. And I'll see what they want to say about this. They've talked about this in a number of the books, but I don't want to say this. They're saying we would only say this, the idea of pain itself. The idea of pain itself as a teacher, while helpful also gets you pain, But to understand that you idealize an idea, an idea of how you should be, I should be fit, I should be happy, I should be happy, I should be wealthy, when in fact your lessons may come, through the lack of those things. You make one thing higher than the next. You make one thing higher than the next, when in fact that is not so. Everything is to learn. Everything is an opportunity to learn. He is interrupting. So if we're in pain, what do we do? So if we're in pain, what do we do? Realize the inherent divine. That must be there anyway. You're not disregarding the pain. You are not disregarding the pain, not pretending not in pain. You are not pretending you are not in pain. You're claiming the inherent divinity, but you are claiming the inherent divinity, the aspect of self. And the aspect of self, be it a wounded emotion, or a wounded body, or a wounded body that is having this experience, to claim the presence of the divine in any of these places, will support a higher alignment, potentially release, and potentially a release of what has been plaguing you, period, in the same period.
So it sounds like they're saying it can be used as a teacher as well.
Yes, it can be, but I don't know why they said that, don't attach to it. Well, the idea of don't attach to it. So the idea of, look at me, I'm so sensitive in all my pain, that can also be the personality itself claiming an identification through pain.
Right.
Gotcha.
Now, what about, this is maybe another progression along this step. When we talked about pain, illness, suffering, that sort of thing. Can they give us any insight onto what happens after we pass over?
I always say I'm not a spiritual medium, and that I don't do a lot of work with those who've crossed. The guys that I work with, they're not like my dead uncle. They're teachers, and they're operating at a different level. What I understand is, and they talk about this in Book of Freedom. I think it's Book of Freedom. No, it's actually the one that's coming out next. Book of Beyond the Known Realization. They talk a bit specifically about this, but basically we're releasing our attachment to this octave. It's not that we don't continue to exist. We do. We're just existing in a different way. So, this is school. This is an opportunity to learn. School is ongoing. That's how I understand it. There's more to be said, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Very good.
Did you have anything else you wanted to ask, Mike?
Well, whether it's appropriate or not, I would like to ask if you'd be willing to do a psychic reading on me.
I'll tune in. I haven't had enough coffee to do this as effectively as I would like, but I'll see if I can tune in at all. Give me your whole name, please.
Michael Raymond Zaremba.
Let me see if I can get you. You come through like this. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? I need to do it right. Some of this is about needing to be seen as doing it right, and then I'm okay. I'm okay. There's a sense here of almost being a good team player at that level. Like I'm doing it right, I'm helping the team. And there's a desire here, which is interesting, and I don't know if I'm right or not, of not to be singled out. I don't really want that, but I do want to be seen as capable of doing it right. And this seems to agree to this idea of achievement. Am I achieving right? Am I doing sex right? It's this idea that there's kind of a right that has to be confirmed, and that this is a way that you're able to progress. And in some way, I want to suggest they're saying our rules are helpful for you. Actually, in some ways, you use rules, I want to suggest, to your benefit, because it gives you sort of a sense of, like, if I'm walking down a hallway, I'm not going to get too lost because I can feel the wall on either side of me. Do you understand? So I can keep progressing. And I seem to do this through this assessment of, is this right? I don't know who you're asking that of. I'm actually pointing to your brother, which is interesting. Both of you. you actually seem to do this with each other. And I think effectively, but this is a way, say this, yes, that you counter one another's fear. So in some ways, it's like you're kind of lucky. See, now I'm seeing the both of you walking down that hallway, and it's like a sort of a neutral hallway, but you're like throwing a bucket of water on him when he needs it, and you can sort of splash him back. Do you understand this?
Yes.
So it's some of it's like reality check, but you see, it's both like we're doing it right. So
Right.
this seems to be inherited. So that's just how I feel you when I step in. What's your question?
I guess my question would be if am I doing it right is kind of like, I think it's a pretty deep question of like, I'm trying, on one sense, I'm not trying too hard, but I am trying to develop as a spiritual being and to understand and to explore and to, ultimately get to truth.
Well, what I hear in response to this is, what if it didn't matter? And then you drop your jaw like, what? Like it doesn't matter, really? Yes, that's all there. And then I hear yes, and then it's all there. The image with this is of you standing at the base of a totem pole. And if you can climb to the very top of the pole, you're going to have the answer. But I think what happens if you do it this way is you realize that you're at the top of the totem pole and you don't know how to stay there. And it's frightening. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of it being elsewhere and elevated, challenging for you. So I'm going to ask about your spiritual life. You're very vulnerable about this, and you actually do say it's what I came here for. And you know that. And that's not going to change. You see, what I'm hearing is that what I was telling you, or they were just telling you, this idea of what it doesn't matter, which actually was my tune into you, and that was from the guides, that would actually be very liberating for you, because you'd finally realize that there isn't a top of a totem pole, there's just where you are right now. And that's where it is. And this sense of obligation to path and to trekking up the mountain and all that stuff, that sort of changes. I'm where I am and only where I am. And the idea, say this, yes. They're saying, say this, yes, God is where I am, because it can't be anywhere else. That's what's a little mind-boggling. And that's less about doing it right than about it's forgiving. It's more about forgiving yourself for not being where you think you're supposed to be. Letting yourself be where you are, and then being in reception of what's present. You really can't make, I'm going to say this, God be God. God, you can only know God. Or allow God to know you, and use whatever word you want for God. They're saying to you, he needs to understand that his presence is what's key, not what he does. And that's going to be a gift to him. It doesn't stop you from doing, but it changes how you do it, but it does change how you do it. It's not about not having ambition. It is about trusting yourself to be where you are, and then be the recipient of the good that's present for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I hope that was helpful.
Absolutely. Yep. I look forward to listening back and letting it sink in even deeper.
Okay.
Is there any other messages coming through from the guides before we wrap up today? Anything that they think that would be important for us for them to get across, for us to know?
And with our audience.
With your audience, thank them all. They're saying thank them all for their indulgence. We enjoy these opportunities to teach. We enjoy these opportunities to teach to a new audience. We support them each as they wish it, and we support them each as they wish it. We thank you both as well. We thank you both as well for the speech, for the introduction, to this work. We bless you each, and we bless you each in your endeavors. We've never heard that before. Thank you both. They're saying thank you both. I've never heard I bless you both for your endeavors. That's a first.
Well, thank you, guides. I appreciate that.
Thank you, guides.
Okay.
That's amazing. They're probably around.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us in studio. This has been a true pleasure and an honor. Thanks for coming to Vancouver and sharing your wisdom and the guys' wisdom with the people of Vancouver, because I think it's going to ripple out and create positivity within this city, and I think uplift people in the right way. So thank you so much for joining us. Your website is paulselig.com. And any word on when the next book is coming out?
Comes out in August.
August
6th, I believe.
Beyond the known, realization.
And of course, you're on the normal social media channels, right? And people can find you quite easily if they're looking for you. So thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to talking to you again.
I do too. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
And I think that's all we have for today. If you'd like to try flotation therapy, you can use the promo code VancouverReal, and that will get you a 20% discount on a single float. My name is Andy Zaremba. Of course, Mike Zaremba behind the helm. And until next time.
To whatever is.
To whatever is.